I feel humbled after such a presentation. And first of all, I would like to thank Roland and Thomas for the invitation. And I apologize for my voice. I wasn't feeling very well these days, but I thought that I cannot miss this opportunity of coming here. So, dear colleagues, indeed, it's my great honor to stand in front of you all today and to tell you a story of Lithuania 2050, as it was announced already, the project that I had the pleasure to lead a couple of years ago. And using the opportunity, I will also tell you a little bit about Lithuania, a country that you may never heard of or visited before. And I would usually say in that case, that's a small country, but being here in South Tyrol, I realized that we are not so small, in fact. And although I was a little bit introduced already, but I still want to say a few words about my professional career, where mostly 15 years was dedicated to Lithuanian public service, where I was responsible for Seimas, that's the name of our parliament in international relations. But I also have experience of working in the media, in the National Library, in the Government Strategic Analysis Center, and even the Military Academy of Lithuania. And currently I'm, as it was said, the policy analyst working in the Competence Center of Foresight in the GRC. By my academic background, I consider myself to be a political scientist. And one of my favorite books from those times is The Essence of Decision. It essentially says that there are three ways to look at decision making, or at least that there are three different explanatory lenses that could be derived from to look at things. From that book, you could say that first is a rational actor model, organizational model, and governmental politics model. But I dare to say that in addition to that, or also behind all these three models, there's also subjective perspective to look at things. Even though political science doesn't like subjectivities, but nevertheless, I will try you now to tell you the story of Lithuania 2050 from all those different lenses. Let's start from the rational actor model. Lithuania has well-established strategic planning traditions. And before Lithuania 2050, there were at least a couple of documents that could qualify as long-term strategies for the state. But as the prior Lithuania 2030 strategy was mainly focused on internal aspects such as societal, economic, and governance issues, and did not take into consideration global changes happening around us. And in addition, taking into account the strategic planning reform or strategic management reform that was taking place at that time in Lithuania, the government decided to launch a development of a new long-term strategy, Lithuania 2050. According to the law of strategic management, this is one of the highest level strategic planning documents. You see the whole scheme here in the slide. So that is one of the strategic planning, strategic level documents. That is the state vision. And this strategy had to set the vision for the state progress. That is what we intend to achieve in terms of our security, social, economic, and environmental development in the long term, as well as the main directions for the country's progress and impact indicators. Another requirement for the strategy was to be consistent with the national security strategy and the concept of territorial development. These are the two other key important documents. And the vision was to be implemented with the help of a range of lower-level strategic planning documents. Here you see all of them with different timeframes. If to look from the organizational perspective, there were at least 4 key actors involved. That is the Office of the Government. Strategy was one of the projects in the strategic management portfolio of the Prime Minister of the time, Ingrida Šimonytė portfolio. So it was the owner of the project. The Lithuanian Parliament, Seimas, and specifically Seimas Committee for the Future, which was established in 2020, took an active role from the parliamentary control perspective. Vilnius University, which is the oldest in the region, was responsible for convening and bringing together into the process all academic community of our country. And then the Government Strategic Analysis Center, Strata, was delegated with the task of implementing the project. And I should also say that last but not the least, we should mention the 5th actor, that is the State Progress Council. That is one of the actors in our strategic governance system, and it is an advisory institution to our government. It was convened with a special task of monitoring the development and currently implementation of the strategy Lithuania 2050. And in addition, it has to promote public discussions about the future of our country and society. It was composed of renowned people of our country, representing various sectors, decision makers from all parliamentary parties, academia, public and private sector, civil society. And as you'll see, that's even not the whole picture. Governmental politics model. Before starting the development of Lithuania 2050, we also made an evaluation of Lithuania 2030 strategy, both in terms of implementation and in terms of preparation. So one of the most important lessons learned, at least for me personally, was that it is very important to include all major political actors into discussions and not to make it just a ruling party or ruling coalition exercise if we want the strategy to survive at least the next parliamentary election. I must also say, as it was mentioned by Claire, that this historical Montfleur scenarios was one of the inspirations also for me, and I wanted the flamingos fly for Lithuania too. And now let me tell you the story from my own perspective, that is subjective one, and the one that combines rational approaches with dreams and imagination. We like to think about ourselves that we are a country of dreamers and visionaries, starting from our very first king, Mindaugas, who nearly 800 years ago created our state and passed it to further generations to cherish and renew. You see here one of the pictures and paintings by one of the most famous painters and symbolist and composer of Lithuania, Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis, The Fairy Tale of Kings, which was designed some 100 years ago, envisioning a tiny country in the hands of the giant kings. However, it was not always so tiny. Once one of the biggest and influential states in Europe, stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea, our country also suffered wars, occupations, and other turbulences. I myself am a living example of the dramatic changes that happened to Lithuania just in the last century. I was born as a child occupied by Soviets, the country occupied by Soviets, a land behind the Iron Curtain. A great-granddaughter of a man who was a volunteer in our independence wars in the late 1910s and early 1920s. He was arrested in 1944 and deported to Komi Republic in the Arctic. As a child, I knew nothing about the story, as it was too dangerous to talk to kids about those things. And it's only recently that my mother told about his everyday in the labor camp, where the pants would freeze to his skin and people working the whole day in the coal mines would get only a bowl of soup for the lunch. He was one of the nearly 350,000 of victims of the Soviet occupation. But nevertheless, they were not able to kill the dream of independent Lithuania. And I witnessed our country breaking free from the Soviet Union as a result of the Singing Revolution in the 90s. And thanks to the bravery of the people who withstood Soviet tanks and economic blockade. Since then, Lithuania underwent deep triple transition, political, economic, social, and became a fully fledged member of EU and NATO only 20 years later. OECD economic report from the 20 stated Lithuania's economy is performing strongly and converging fast towards the most developed OECD countries, driven by growing exports and investments and supported by a sound macroeconomic framework as well as a friendly business climate. And yes, of course, one should not forget that we are good at basketball. And we love the sun and the sea, as we are also a country of rain. Lietus, Lietuva. Life seemed to be good, so why do we still need dreams and visions? As you know by now, in 2020, a new law on strategic management was adopted in Lithuania, and the newly formed government wanted to reflect on the long-term future of the state in view of the changing environment and global and mega trends. In addition, there were quite many public discussions about the future of the country at that time. For instance, that after having reached a certain level of development, further growth required fundamental structural reforms, otherwise Lithuania risked being fall into middle income trap. At that time, I was working at Strata, and we were asked to propose a concept for the development of the strategy. Inspired by the foreign countries, by the examples of some foreign countries such as Finland, Singapore, Denmark, and others, as well as foresight works of the EU Policy Lab, we have proposed to the Office of the Government to use strategic foresight and co-creation as two main approaches. As a political scientist, I was concerned with the trust and legitimacy gap that we sometimes witness in the policy making. Hence, one of the main principles we followed in the process was to open up our process and invite a wide range of stakeholders, especially civil society, to participate. Every organization willing to contribute was able to do that. And we also created an open database for experts willing to contribute. So it was not just the policymakers, but also representatives of academia, business, people from creative industries. And we also invited ordinary citizens to participate. And in fact, we started from them. At the very beginning of the process, we implemented a special project, Expedition to Lithuania 2050. Where we invited people living outside our capital, Vilnius, in some smaller distant towns and villages, as well as representatives of youth and our diaspora to come and discuss their hopes, visions, and fears for the future. It was a wide participatory exercise where more than 100 people participated, and we collaborated with local libraries in that exercise and wanted to invite as diverse audience as possible, especially youth, marginalized people, or people under social exclusion, national minorities, diaspora representatives. A special report with findings from that expedition was prepared and published, and the ideas expressed were also used as an input to the main content of the document. This was a kind of a mini project in this big project of the process Lithuania 2050, and in this slide you see the schematic overview of all of it, with the main stages of preparation, scenario creation, generation of ideas, and strategic ambitions, as well as the preparation of the draft vision itself. You also see all the activities implemented, and I must say that the overall process was grounded in 4 complementary knowledge modes: evidence-based, expertise-driven, creativity-oriented, and interactive participatory approaches to ensure both methodological robustness and inclusive engagement. For instance, Citizens' Council, thematic discussions with experts and various stakeholders on scenarios and strategic ambitions, and so on. Yet scenario workshops, I must say, was one of the main elements in our process, and 2 reasons for that. One is that, of course, that it is usually considered to be one of the main elements in foresight processes and creation of a vision. And as we wanted a robust vision, we invited more than 100 participants representing various fields to participate in 3 full-day sessions, from 60 to in each of them. We used 2x2 scenario matrix and identified 11 elements covering major aspects of the state life for development in those scenarios. However, when nearly everything was ready, a black swan showed up. 2 weeks just before the event, Russia started its war against Ukraine. In that single night, the world changed for us once again. And in that context, the question about the future of our country became more acute than they were before. In addition to global level trends and factors, it also highlighted the importance of culture and values. This context helped to identify key uncertainties critical for our future. That is, rising tensions between autocracies and democracies and transformation of education, to be understood in the broadest sense. Thus, we came up with 4 scenarios, as well as we devised pathways leading to each of them. The English version of scenarios is also available. Scenarios, as we know, are not the predictions of the future, but they serve as a useful thinking tool for thinking about various possible futures. And I must say it worked very well with discussions with various stakeholders and ordinary citizens of what future do we want for our country. The North Star scenario was chosen as a preferred one and served as an inspiration for our vision. One of the conclusions that came out from that process was that if we want this future to happen, we would not only have to adapt in a proactive way to the changes happening around us, strengthen, or if you wish, deepen the democracy, as well as prioritize education. But we also need to think about our culture and values, which means a need to preserve our identity, but also to change our society in a certain way, be more open, foster mutual trust, care and responsibility for ourselves and our environment. We thus placed culture, understood as a universal force of creativity that provides meaning to our lives, as something that links our past, present, and future at the heart of our vision. And a couple of words about the vision itself. From the broad discussions, it appeared that there are 2 fundamental principles we need to integrate. That is the care for nature, that is still at the core of Lithuanian identity, and the need to develop and integrate technologies and innovations into all aspects of our life. As the law on strategic management requires, 5 major directions, or pillars if you wish, were crystallized for the future of the progress of the state. First is citizen-led democracy. Free, future-ready and resilient individuals thriving in a caring society, business, science and art sustainably generating value for Lithuania and the world, a resilient state, a constructive and influential player in global politics, and a connected country with sustainable and well-balanced development. All this constitutes our guiding light, the country where I want to live and create, the country I want to protect. Here are some key numbers from the process. It took us a bit more than 2 years, nearly 3 years. More than 50 events were organized, 18 reports as accompanying documents for the vision were prepared for deliberations in the Parliament. According to estimations, about 200 organizations and 2,500 people were involved in total, and about 400 ideas and proposals for the vision and strategic ambitions were suggested. They served as a basis for development of the vision. The draft vision document has undergone 3 public consultations and was deliberated by all standing committees at our Parliament. It was approved at the end of December 2023 with 81 votes in favor out of 141. These were representatives of all parliamentary groups and 50 abstentions. Nobody voted against. So one could say it was a success. I'd like to also think that the process or the document, contributed to the development of the ecosystem for future governance that is being shaped in Lithuania currently. What was equally important to me here, you see some actors of that ecosystem, but what was equally important to me was the words of one of our prime ministers, also the member of the State Progress Council, that the process itself, where different people could gather and discuss country's future, was perhaps even more important than the words we have put into the document. And to continue with about the intangible aspects of participatory foresight and society's engagement. Last December, an article which aimed to establish a conceptual framework on assessing the impact of participatory foresight in the journal Futures was published. It used the case of Lithuania 2050 to assess the framework. For that purpose, the survey among co-creators was disseminated, which aimed to measure both immediate effect and intermediate impacts of participation. So I will not discuss the full framework here, but say only this. The results revealed a strong sense of the shared implementation commitment, which reflects personal and organizational commitment to realizing the foresight vision. I think this answers only too well why do we need dreams and visions. But if you permit me, I will add to this some final remarks, once again using my own example. At that time, I had a vision, a dream of being able to participate in such a process one day seemed like something beyond reach, and I was just a jobless person who had quit the office of the Parliament after 15 years of service. Nevertheless, today I stand in front of you today and tell you the story of Lithuania 2050. Thank you for your attention.